Hello, thank you. It's nice to be here. I'm a journalist based in London. I'm the senior commissioning editor of GQ, where I edit our tech coverage, and I'm formerly the associate editor of Wired magazine, and I still contribute regularly to Wired. And what this means is I spend a lot of my time talking to the disruptive thinkers, the innovative companies, and the researchers at the cutting edge, trying to work out what's coming next. Now, we don't always get it right. Here's a famous cover from 2010, "The web is dead." Well, how did that work out? I used it just this morning. But when I was preparing this talk, I was reminded of a prediction that was in the very first issue of the UK edition of Wired back in 2008. And it was for the cover story. We asked a group of experts in their field to make predictions for the next 50 years. And one of the people I interviewed was Vint Cerf, who designed the architecture of the internet, really, and is now the chief internet evangelist at Google. And his prediction was this. He said, this is 2008, he said, by 2018, I'm anticipating that several hundreds of millions of devices will be online. And he went on to say they might be little sensors, they could be monitoring temperature, they might be video cameras. So today, that prediction looks quite prescient, but you might say he underestimated it because, of course, there are actually billions of connected devices today. In fact, last year, it was estimated that it passed 8.4 billion, which is more than the number of people on Earth. So why did Vint Cerf underestimate it? Well, I think it's because right now, we're living through a time of profound change. The nature of change in a digital age is qualitatively different from anything we've ever had before. A few decades ago, Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel, he noticed that the number of transistors on a silicon chip were doubling every 2 years. And that pattern, known, of course, as Moore's Law, has actually held true ever since. And in fact, it looks set to continue. And what that means is that our capabilities as a human race are doubling every 2 years. That's never happened before in history, and it means the culture can change in profound ways before we really notice. Look at Fortnite Battle Royale, the biggest game in the world. It didn't exist until a year ago. So innovation cycles are shrinking. And I think what this means for the Internet of Things is that all the things that we expect it might do, all the things we hope it might do, the scale at which it's going to grow, all of that stuff is actually going to happen a lot quicker than we perhaps think. Now, I think everyone in this room today is trying to work out how best to innovate with the Internet of Things and how best to be part of that future in a meaningful way. Because I do think there is a wrong way to approach the Internet of Things, because sensors are now so cheap, thanks to the smartphone wars. People are putting sensors perhaps into things that don't really need them. And I call this the Internet of Idiocy. So how about this? This is the smart hairbrush released at CES last year. It can tell you when you've got split ends because you can't see them yourself. Or how about this? This is the Smolt. It's a smart salt shaker. You ask Amazon Alexa, and it dispenses salt, because presumably turning the grinder is too much like hard work. But for all of the things associated with the Internet of Idiocy, there's also a load of things the Internet of Things is poised to do, which society really needs. It's poised to transform healthcare, energy, water management, the way we get to work, the way we work. And so what I wanted to talk about today is where the real meaningful innovation is happening, and to draw out some of the trends that I've been noticing that I think might become important over the next couple of years. So there's a bit to get through, so I'll push on. The first trend, from the cloud to the edge. Now, the received wisdom until recently was that all the data that the Internet of Things produces will be processed in the cloud. And the Internet of Things is, of course, really all about data. But there are some problems with that. A, it produces a lot of data, and B, shipping it to the cloud to get some analytics done, to get a result back, there's latency. It takes a while. So what companies are realizing is exactly what Oculus VR's chief technology officer, John Carmack, the great game designer, once observed, which is the speed of light sucks. So it's actually preferable in some instances to get more of the heavy lifting, more of the computational work done on the devices themselves, so not centrally on the cloud, but at the edge of the network. And in April this year, Microsoft released a dedicated edge Internet of Things platform. This is some equipment by Schneider Electric. It's an irrigation device. It dispenses just the right amount of water depending on wind speed, temperature, crop demands. And already we've got devices analyzing video without having to send anything to the cloud. This is Amazon's Deep Lens. It's a camera aimed at developers to teach them how to do edge computing projects with AI, with video, doing image recognition and that kind of thing. But I think what we're going to see more of is actually the training of the AI's brain, teaching it to be good at the thing it's meant to be good at, actually happening not on the cloud, as it often does, but actually on the device. So I interviewed Mark Hung at Gartner, the big market analysis research firm, and he said that he thought this could be a game changer. He said, imagine that you're looking at traffic management in a city, and he said, there are lots of intersections, and traffic performs differently at each one of them, so you need to optimize that with AI. So what if rather than having the AI draw on general patterns from across the city, you could have an AI at each intersection that was just learning from its intersection and the traffic there. So it would very efficiently, very quickly become really, really good at running that intersection. And there are startups now trying to make this a reality. So Swim, for instance, this is a piece of software that it says transforms devices into data scientists. It's just raised 10 million euros in funding. The chip design firm ARM is one of the backers. And this is a simulation of it turning off the lights in a smart city in response to ambient lighting, in response to where people are and where vehicles are. My next trend, brain transplants. What do I mean by this? So as investment in the Internet of Things grows, there's a big market opening for devices that turn previously dumb devices into smart devices. This has been going on for a while, of course, but now there's some really innovative stuff happening. One of my favorites is this company, Sensei. It's a Portuguese startup founded last year. It's raised €500,000. It lets you use any camera that's already in your shop. It's a piece of software, and it lets you repurpose that camera as a powerful sensor. So you can see where people are spending time in your shop, whether they're buying the thing they take off the shelves. And then you can optimize staffing. You can optimize shelf replenishment. Or how about Watty? This plugs into your electricity meter. It's a device from a Swedish startup. It's raised €4.1 million. And it gives you the kinds of insights you might expect from a smart meter, but it's quite clever. It can detect the fingerprint in the data of your different household appliances, your games console, your juicer, your computer, and give you a really granular breakdown so you can make decisions to save power and save money. And I think a lot of this is happening in a very interesting way in industry. One great example is Norway's Disruptive Technologies. They sell wireless mini sensors, and these can detect things like temperature, movement, touch, and they go on your existing machinery, and they turn your factory into a smart factory. Moving on, trend 3, blockchain. Now, blockchain is, as we all know, in the simplest terms, a database held in a peer-to-peer network. When one person's copy of the record updates, everybody's updates. So it's very secure. It's probably most known for Bitcoin, of course, but the underlying technology of Bitcoin, blockchain, could be really interesting for the Internet of Things. Look at this startup, Filament, in the US. It's raised $22.5 million, and it's just announced a new product. This is the Blocklet chip. It connects industrial devices or shipping containers and allows them to communicate with those unchangeable blockchain ledgers. I spoke to Andy Stanford Clark. He's the chief technology officer in the UK for IBM, and I said to him, what could the most interesting application be? And to his mind, the most powerful one was in supply chain and looking at custody transfer. So If something happens, you can track and trace back up the line to see where the problem was, and if there is indeed a problem. So it was announced recently that IBM is working with Walmart. This is Walmart's production line here. Walmart now puts everything that happens to every piece of food, every step of the way, on a blockchain. So what that means is, if there's a food scare, they don't have to pull all of that category of product just in case they're contaminated. They can know with certainty if the item on the shelf is something that they can sell. Trend 4, privacy is the new security. Now, look, don't get me wrong. Security is still obviously a hugely important area. We're going to hear some more on security later on today. But I just wanted to draw attention to the innovation that's happening in privacy at the moment. A guy who's fantastic on this is Professor Hugh Durrant-White. He's the Chief Scientific Advisor to the Ministry of Defence in the UK, and he's particularly excited about homomorphic encryption. This means you can have a data set, you can encrypt it, you can give it to somebody else, and they can run analytics on that encrypted data without decrypting it, and it returns the result. The result's in encrypted format, they send it back to you, you can decrypt it. So someone can analyze your data without ever seeing your data. Now, this is something which a few startups are trying to bring to market. It hasn't been possible at scale until now. It's been around for a while, not possible in this sort of industrial way. So one of the most interesting ones, I think, is Encrypted Veil. It's founded by a former National Security Agency researcher. It's raised $4 million from the likes of Thomson Reuters. It's really useful for companies handling sensitive data. And finally, industry for the win. So there's a big shift underway, big shift of interest from the consumer Internet of Things to the industrial Internet of Things. In 2017, the industrial IoT was worth around $145 billion globally. It's projected by 2023 to be worth around $232 billion. And when you start driving an industry with data, you can do really, really clever things with predictive maintenance, with supply chain optimization. But to me, perhaps the most interesting thing is what is often termed the Internet of Robots, because there are now manufacturers using autonomous robots in really clever ways. So, for example, it could be in a warehouse. This is Gray Orange's Butler.
System, an intelligent goods-to-person order fulfillment system that consists of Butler, pick-put stations, mobile storage units or racks, and smart charging stations.
Or whether that's in a factory. So this is a cobot helping a lady with her work. It's made by a company called Rethink Robotics. They're imagining a future where the robots don't take all the jobs. And think where this could be going. If you want to see how sophisticated robots are getting, take a look at what Boston Dynamics has been doing recently. This is their humanoid robot, Atlas. It can see where obstacles are, it can hop over them, and it can right itself. They have this is their dog. You may have seen it in a clip that went viral. It was opening a door in quite a creepy way. But here it is, avoiding obstacles as it goes. It's operating autonomously. It knows where it needs to get to. It's making the decisions. And it's got another trick. You can climb upstairs. How creepy is that? So I suppose I just want to do a little bit of future gazing and say, imagine a future where factories have got autonomous robots performing tasks with great dexterity. And if that sounds like science fiction, let me leave you with this quote from Yuval Noah Harari. He's the guy who wrote *Sapiens* a few years back. If someone describes to you the world of the mid-21st century and it doesn't sound like science fiction, it's certainly false. We cannot be sure of the specifics, but change itself is the only certainty. Change itself is the only certainty. Thank you.